So we're with Johanna Rothman, who's an independent Agile consultant who speaks to people and helps people with their management of their Agile projects, or helps the managers.
I help the managers and the project managers. That's the place where I'm asked to intervene, and that's the place where I do intervene.
Okay, very good. So Agile's been, around for a few years now.
Yeah.
Have you found that people need a lot of help?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of people who think that they're Agile, and that's because the developers are working in time boxes, and they hand off to test or QA at the end. That's not Agile.
Right.
It's working in time boxes is great, right? Having developers do small iterations, do small increments of work, that's good. But anytime you hear someone say handoff, probably not Agile.
Right. So that's not embracing the team aspect.
Right. How do teams work together? How do you create done at the end of an iteration? If it's developer done, is that sufficient? Probably not.
And the whole definition of done.
Right. So there have been a bunch of teams I've worked with where actually the best thing I could do for them, which is what I did, was facilitate their decision of what does done mean. Because it's really hard for people to know what done means. Right? If you're moving from a really waterfall life cycle to a totally agile life cycle, it's a completely different way of looking at things.
Right.
So it's hard to do well.
So I would imagine that there's some difficulty with managers making that transition when they're used to one structure, one reporting scheme, one set of metrics for the project, and now we're doing this agile thing, and there's a completely different set of criteria and reporting.
Managers are all confused because they no longer need to do the tactical day-to-day work, and they need to think strategically, but no one's ever told them how to think strategically. They need to pay attention to the people. No one's ever told them that. They need to pay attention to the project portfolio, so the teams only have to work on one project at a time. They don't know how to do that. I mean, it's a huge challenge for managers. And one of the things that they're really having trouble with is this notion of, how do I know who's productive? Well, you could ask the team. The team will tell you who's productive.
Right, the agile way of right.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you encounter different companies and different groups, have you found any particular industry or any particular group that is kind of doing better than any other?
I wish I could say there was a theme to who's doing better and who's not. I have not seen that theme.
Right.
I think that it's really, how well do people adapt in their organizations? How well does the organization adapt? Because that's actually one of the big things. A lot of organizations are not very adaptable, and that makes it very difficult for them to transition to Agile. It makes it very hard for the managers.
Right. So I've seen a lot of adoption of Agile coming like from the bottom up, from the developers up to the management. Are we seeing more adoption from the top down yet? Or?
Well, there's the senior management saying, we must go Agile. And there are the developers saying, we wanna. And frequently the testers are right along with them saying, yeah, we want to do this too. Right. And then there are the managers in the middle, and those people are really having a tough time because they get this mandate from above, and the senior managers don't know what they're asking the middle managers to do. And the developers are pushing at them from the bottom, saying, hey, get with the program. Well, and they are really stuck, which is one of the reasons I wrote the Project Portfolio book, and one of the reasons I'm writing a lot about Agile management now.
Right. So you're currently writing another book?
Well, I'm always currently writing a book or two. I had planned for my next book to be about Agile program management, because I think one of the big problems that teams are encountering now is we know how to make this work really well for 2 or 3 teams. We're not so good at big programs. What happens if you have 300 people on a program? What happens if you want to integrate hardware? What happens if you want to integrate firmware? There are a bunch of of techniques for 1 and 2 teams, but how do you translate that to 50 teams? You could argue that there should not ever be a project of 50 teams, but we have them. And I think that there's a way to do this in an agile way. So that's one of the things that I'm exploring now. I'll be talking about that this week at UberConf.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I'm writing a lot is what managers need to do to really manage in an agile environment.
Right.
How do they help make it happen? How do they make it, how do they pave the way for everyone to succeed? That's actually a little harder because I have fewer clients who are succeeding with the management piece. So I have to have more stories to tell, not just do this and do that. That's not a very helpful approach, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I need some successes.
Right, but the future looks bright for these.
Oh, absolutely. I think the key is, well, one of the keys is actually the rest of the organization. So the facilities folks who are the furniture police and the internet police and the cubicle police, those people have an astonishing amount of power in the organization.
Mm.
And when managers learn to deal with that power, that's a huge help. The purchasing people have an enormous amount of power.
Right.
The HR people have an enormous amount of power. And it's not that all of these people are bad and should be thrown away. They all have a place. But it's really interesting how everyone else's philosophies and guidelines change how we can develop software. And if you need those guidelines to change, or those rules to change, so that you can develop software more easily and better, well, that's a huge job for a manager to do. I have a client right now who's trying to deal with, how do I change the reward and recognition system? Right? How do you give raises? And we're not talking about lots of percentages. We're talking about the difference between 1% and 1.25%.
Right.
And the HR people really feel very strongly that they must have criteria for the difference between 1% and 1.25%. I mean, it's crazy.
Right. Right. So perhaps they should learn some about agile estimating and
They should. Yeah.
Quantization of values there. Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.